When you come to AI, where you know the cause of that, you can say, oh, well, that's designed by someone. You're happy to acknowledge intelligent design there, but not with an infinitely more complicated and finely tuned universe. And I'm saying that's not consistent.
There's no evidence.
But the evidence, but acknowledge evidence in AI. Well, why wouldn't it acknowledge it for the universe? It's just a much more complicated, exquisitely fine-tuned, engineered, exquisite machine, if you like, much more than this mere human creation. You'll acknowledge it in the human creation, but you won't acknowledge divine creation. And I'm saying they're both creations. One is the creation of our mind, and so is the other.
I'm agnostic, but then it's an extra faith to say Islam is the way.
What is Islam, do you think? What's Islam about?
Islam is submission to the one who is worthy of worship.
Right, but Islam, it means submission of one's will to God, but Islam is centered on the existence of the Creator, submitting our wills to the Creator. You find the Creator God in Judaism, in Christianity, and so on.
Highly specific and lawful.
So I'm saying that if you acknowledge intelligent design with AI, I don't understand why you don't acknowledge intelligent design with, say, DNA, the laws of physics.
Yeah, I guess you can say
I don't see it.
But it's not, I don't have to keep consistent in every sort of regard.
I'm just interested to know your reasons why you acknowledge design in one case and not in the other. I don't see why you stop short with one.
We can create something like that. We could have been created by an alien race.
But did we create the universe?
We're nothing like God. So the fact that we are
absolutely
able to create something like that proves that you don't need God for this sort of stuff.
No. If we see exquisite design and engineering in nature, which we do, obviously, that suggests an intelligence. Just like the AI that man created with Google. So it's the same logic, but you're saying the logic applies to one and not to the other. And I don't understand why you make that.
Maybe it is intelligent design, but God is a whole different step away from that.
Well, God is not just a designer.
The genome of intelligent design is there. God, superior species, evolution. I mean, what's to say that evolution is in a theological sense isn't an intelligent design of itself? It's a moving force.
Well, if evolution happened, I don't have a problem with it. It's a God-directed process. God's still involved in or directs the process. As scientists involved in what is observable, but as human beings, we can look more holistically at everything and say, God caused the universe to exist. He sustains it in existence. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something now in existence? You can't say evolution. That's not an answer, because I'm asking a metaphysical question. Science can't address these questions.
Well, yeah, we should have taught metaphysical, so shouldn't we?
Why not?
Well, because that's gobbledygook. That's stepping out.
Why is it gobbledygook? It's perfectly rational to me. They're reasonable. If you see something that is exquisitely designed, you say there's a creator or designer of it. That's not gobbledygook.
Well, you mentioned metaphysics. So metaphysics is stepping outside rationality and physics.
Metaphysics is simply what is beyond physics. It is. You see, the question's still there. We may not like to ask it, but people are going to say, why is there something rather than nothing? Why does the universe bother to exist moment by moment? And Darwin doesn't answer that question. Sorry?
So maybe the universe was infinite. Maybe it wasn't created.
It wasn't infinite. It became about the Big Bang. We know that.
You don't know what was before that. Maybe there was
no before.
There's a multiverse theory where there's constant black holes, and then out of that black hole, infinitely dense space, there is an explosion.
You're still left with the same question.
Okay, but I've answered I said I'm not sure, and that's why I'm agnostic, and I said maybe there is a God. Maybe you're right. I completely concede that. Now, can you answer my question?
Which is what?
How can God be all-loving if someone is destined, he is made by God for hell? Because God knows this man will never be Muslim.
Okay.
And he knows about his heart.
Okay. God, as we know from his...
you can't say... Sorry, go on.
Please don't tell me what I can't say. That's not quite fair.
I take God is unseen and understandable as an answer.
You can't tell me in advance what I can and cannot say by way of an answer.
No, so I didn't mean that. I mean I won't accept that.
Okay, but that's fine. I'm not going to look to please you. I'm not going to look to make you happy. I'm not going to look... that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the truth. Okay. There are many things in the hidden wisdom of God that I don't understand. I don't understand why he created you, for example. There's a good reason why he did. There's a good reason why lots of things in the universe happen the way they do. It's an article of Islamic belief that God not only creates the universe but sustains it, and he determines everything that exists. It's also taught in Islam that we have is a supposition of ethics, actually, and the call of the prophets to us that we respond, that we have some free will. I don't understand understand in my finite human mind how to make theoretical sense of that. Maybe some people can, I can't. That doesn't mean it's not true. It means I need to have some epistemic humility, and not think I must have all the answers before I believe anything, because there are lots of things I don't know about life. All right. Now, the reason I talk about epistemic humility is that when we don't know things and don't answer, it doesn't mean that's an argument against something. It means we don't know the answer. And that's cool, actually. I don't have a problem with not knowing stuff unless I'm morally required to know things like when to submit my bank account details or my tax, that I had to know about. But when it comes to really, really big questions, I only know what God has revealed or shown to disclose about his purposes in the Quran and the Torah, in the Injil, the Gospel, and so on. So that would be a broad answer. I don't have a specific answer about Hitler, but I do know that God is in control.
Or any man, me.
Or any man. These answers, the Quran does state that these questions will be answered. So I'm happy to wait for the answer. If you're impatient and say, no, I want them now, that's okay, but you're still not going to get them now. You're only going to get them later.
Well, it will be too late if he answers me from hell.
You see,
because I'll already be there for eternity.
Why will you be in hell? Why are you so sure?
Because I'm not convinced that Prophet Muhammad was the last messenger.
And why are you not convinced that he was the last messenger, or a prophet, even?
Well, I mean, these are big questions.
I'm interested, actually.
Why am I not? I'm not convinced yet.
Right. What would convince you? What do you need to hear or understand to convince you that Muhammad, upon whom be peace, is a prophet of God?
Well, it's two things. It's what would convince me? Fundamental disembowelment of Christianity.
The fundamental disembowelment of Christianity.
Yeah, which would leave me with only one choice.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because right now it's just a theological war between the two big religions, and I don't know which lane to step in. And also, it would have to be a leap of faith on my behalf, because it's never going to be proved to me unless I get some jinn speaking to me or something.
I think there is proof, but coming back to the Christianity thing, Islam affirms, the Quran affirms Jesus as a prophet of God, as a Messiah of God, born of the Virgin Mary. He will return again. The essentials of belief about Jesus, that many of which you'll find in Christianity, are believed in Islam.
So do you believe that the Injil is sustained, or do you think the Injil was corrupted? Do you believe there was an original Injil that was changed?
What do we mean by the Injil? Is obviously the Arabic word for gospel, singular, and according to the Quran it was given to Jesus. So it's not the Gospels according to Matthew, according to Mark, according to John, according to Luke. It is a single gospel given to Jesus. So it's not the New Testament Gospels, by definition.
When Muhammad went to Ethiopia and they saw the Ethiopians had old gospel books, they had old Bibles. We found these Bibles, and Muhammad was carrying that Bible. I think it says in the Hadith somewhere that Muhammad had one of these Bibles.
I've not come across any Hadith that says that. I don't think.
Why
have you ever come
across?
across?
The first migration was to Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia today.
But he wasn't carrying the Bible. This is not quite right. This is.
I think it is right.
Muhammad himself didn't go.
So we have that.
He didn't go there. That was the first wave of some of his companions who. This is the pre-Hijra in a way that they did their migration because they were being persecuted. That's correct, to my knowledge.
The Prophet didn't go Abyssinia, but
and he didn't have Gospels either, or a Gospel. This is something I've never heard any Muslim or.
Please, why would the disciples not say to the Ethiopians, these are wrong?
Because, I don't know about that.
They believe Jesus was God.
Right, can we just come back to the original point here, which was that Muslim beliefs about Jesus are much more historically credible about who Jesus really was. For example, historians now agree that Jesus primarily saw himself as a prophet, as a Messiah. Christians usually say he's the second person of the Trinity, that he's God. And that he didn't. Historians now don't think that Jesus thought that he was God. The Quran says he wasn't God. I would say the Quran is much more historically credible when it comes to who Jesus was, according to what we now know of history and the Gospels themselves. So the continuity is there from Jesus to Islam in terms of who Jesus really was. The discontinuity is with Christianity and what Jesus really was. Muslims, if you want to follow Jesus today, I would suggest you follow Muhammad and Islam, because Muslims have correct beliefs about Jesus. Christians, if they're traditional Christians, not liberals or radical, tend to have historically unfounded beliefs about Jesus.
Right. So
that's the answer to your question.
I'm agnostic.
Yeah.
But just to play on the Christian side of it, Muslims believe he didn't die on the cross.
Yes.
They believe he didn't get resurrected.
The Quran says that it appeared to them that he had been crucified, but in fact he wasn't crucified. That's the basis of Muslim belief.
Sorry, I got distracted. What was that?
So Muslims believe, because the Quran says that it appeared to them, to the Jews, that he was crucified, but in fact he wasn't crucified.
Right. Yeah, I don't believe that at all. I believe the Romans must have crucified him.
What evidence do you have that he was?
Well, because we can see from the Roman note-keeping that he was.
What note-keeping are you referring to?
Not specifically, but it's widely accepted that Jesus was crucified.
No. What evidence do we have that? Okay, what evidence do we have that he was crucified? I mean, seriously. What textual evidence?
I genuinely believe there is evidence. I don't have it to hand.
Okay. You see, I don't think there is anything. Okay. Because the four Gospels that we have are not eyewitness accounts, we now know. Right. They're second-generation accounts written by unknown people. No, they weren't written by people who knew Jesus. They were anonymous second-generation. So Matthew was not written by the Apostle Matthew. John was not written by Apostle John, according to the overwhelming consensus of modern historians. So what about archaeological evidence? Do we have any physical evidence that we can see? This is Jesus.
Well, we have Jesus' cross in Ethiopia.
Do we?
Yeah, we do.
And in Ethiopia?
Yeah.
Right. How do you know that?
Because an Ethiopian woman told me, and I searched up.
An Ethiopian woman told you?
Yeah. It's the history of Ethiopia.
Do we have anything independent of that that's been scientifically, historically carbon dated to the 1st century?
In what sense?
Well, do we have any wood, if that's what you're saying, that's been carbon dated to the 1st century?
Yeah.
We don't.
We do. It's on a mountain in Ethiopia.
Okay, we don't. No historian or scientist have ever said, you Google it now, that we have the cross of Jesus. It doesn't exist.
But we have.
It disappeared 2,000 years ago.
With the Codex Sinaiticus, the Codex Vaticanus.
The Codex Sinaiticus is a 4th century manuscript in the British Library. It was written 4 centuries after the birth of Jesus. How is that evidence of the crucifixion of Jesus?
Hold on, let me show you this cross.
Codex Sinaiticus was created in about the middle of the 4th century AD. From Mount Sinai.
Yeah, but wasn't the Quran canonized in the 20th century?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was never canonized at all. It was an oral revelation given to the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. It was accepted as revelation immediately by his companions. The Bible wasn't seen as the word of God, by the way. The Gospels weren't seen as the word of God for many generations until afterwards. So you Google that about the cross in Ethiopia.
Yeah,
what's it say?
I'm more interested in what you're saying right now.
Well, that's flattering, but I'm interested to know about this proof of the cross of Jesus.
Well, you're not going to believe it's proof. I'm just going to show you a picture. But this is an Ethiopia.
I want a peer-reviewed journal, any mainstream news source that says we have discovered the cross of Jesus from the 1st century.
Until the brother finds his article, I have a question. Like, if the Gospels are not like the author is not agreed upon, so based on what the church accepted, the source of those Gospels, like, is it like anonymous? The word of God from an anonymous source?
Sorry.
Good question. Carry on. What's it say?
Place where the portion of the cross on which Jesus Christ was crucified is kept in Ethiopia.
Yeah, has it been carbon dated by a scientist?
I don't know.
Well, does it say that it has?
Why would they say that?
Well, we need to. Well, you see, do you know if you go to there's a Catholic church over there in Farm Street.
So that's the African news channel.
And I remember when I was a Roman Catholic, they brought out a fragment of the true cross of Jesus, right? And I said to the priest, as a Jesuit, I said, what, this is actually being dated to the 1st century? And he rebuked me and said, you shouldn't ask such questions like that.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of churches have fragments of the true cross. I submit that none of them have been carbon dated to the 1st century. And if they were all put together, you'd have a forest. And do you know how many, and I'm sorry to be, I'm not being obscene here, but it is a real fact. There are many foreskins of Jesus in churches around medieval Europe. Lots of foreskins of Jesus. How many foreskins did he have? I don't mean to be crude, but this is a reality. These are relics in the medieval church. They're being created for a gullible population. We don't really have thousands of foreskins. We don't really have the Holy Cross. None of it has been dated to the 1st century. It's all religious kind of stuff, which we don't have to really believe in.
Right.
But when it comes to the Gospels, there are excellent reasons now why historians do not believe they're written by eyewitnesses, not least because they don't claim to be written by eyewitnesses. They're anonymous and they contradict each other, and they could not have been written by Jesus' disciples because they're written in sophisticated Greek. The fishermen at that time in Galilee did not read and write. They didn't go to Galilee High School or Galilee University and learn Hebrew. Only 4% of the Roman Empire was actually literate, could read and write. 4%, the elite. Fishermen in Galilee were not part of the elite. The chance of them having written anything is zero.
Well, I don't mind.
Basically.
I don't mind the educated
But
priest.
why this matters is when it comes to eyewitness testimony of the events you described, we don't have it. We have anonymous second generation.
A narrative that's passed down orally through word of mouth, and it's perfectly preserved through word of mouth.
There is what's called mutawata. It's multiply attested. It was handed verbally in two ways, verbally and in written form. Verbally to literally tens or hundreds of thousands of people during the lifetime of the Prophet. So it was not going to be changed. There's so many people knew it was. Secondly, we now have, because I spoke to an expert on this, Dr. Sidki, who's the executive director of the International Quranic Association, we now have 100% of the Quranic manuscripts from the 1st century Hijrah. We actually have physical proof of the same Quran we have today now is the same Quran we had in the 1st century.
First century?
Hijrah.
What does Hijrah mean?
The migration. This is like the Islamic calendar. So the Islamic calendar begins when the Prophet Muhammad emigrated from Mecca to Medina. That's the beginning. The Christian calendar obviously begins from year dot. If I was to ask a Christian how many manuscripts of the Testament do we have from the 1st century, the answer is zero.
So when you say the first
Nothing.
Century, you mean the 8th century?
The life of the Prophet.
Yeah, and how many do we have from the 2nd century, from the Christian era? We only have a tiny credit card-sized fragment of the Gospel of John, called the John Rylands fragment. Exactly. So, when is the earliest complete New Testament ever that we have dated to? New Testament. It's the Codex Sinaiticus, just over there in the British Library. It's dated to the 4th century AD, 400 years after Jesus was born. The earliest Quranic manuscripts and the oral tradition, which is mutawata, massively multiply attested, goes back to the time of the companions, at least the time of the companions.
You have a complete Quran from the 1st century?
Yes.
Complete?
In written form and orally, 100%.
Complete?
Yes.
And
how is this not common knowledge?
Yeah.
It is common knowledge.
By the way, like mutawata means like from different chains, and the count of them are 1,050 different chains of narratives. So like the possibility for them to consensus over like changing the text is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But the other question
this is true. It's a good point.
Is the other question for
about
you
the
is
Gospels?
Like, how come like this is a well-known thing for anybody who studies like Christian, doctrine.
Nice to meet you, mate. Nice to meet you.
No, not at all. Yeah. I want to tap out.
Yeah.
Good to meet you. Inshallah, we'll meet again one day, dude. You need to learn more. But I'm an Englishman like you.
Yeah,
Islam is
reinforcements because I want to find the truth.
Islam is our religion for the future. In Britain, it's our religion.
If I get reinforcements.
What do you mean reinforcements? It's not an army. We're not. No, war.
People who know 10 times more than me, because I'm not a scholar at all.
Okay, I'm not a scholar either. And there are no scholars down here, by the way, so you're not going to get scholars to come. If you did find some, that'd be great. But there are no scholars down here, I'm afraid.
Oh, look, Bob the Builder's not doing anything.
Bob the Builder is not a scholar.
One thing probably I've probably seen at the time of the Prophet Muhammad.
So what was your...
He had like 12 disciples, right? Correct? Only.
Okay.
At the time of Prophet Muhammad, he has 100,000 of disciples. So,
well, companions, yeah.
Companions. So
whoever actually saw him was by definition a companion.
So I have no doubt on the authenticity of the Quran, but like I'm following you on YouTube as well, and I know that like in the Christian like community as scholars, they know that reality. So
yes,
based on what like they base their like salvation on based like on a text that is not really authenticated. Like it's for me it's a no-brainer. Like how come they did not really question it? Like we cannot believe in this text, regardless. Like I'm a Muslim, by the way. I'm not against Christianity, but like I'm just like wondering. And you were there one day, so and you maybe knew that fact that the complete Bible got like maybe collected a couple of hundreds of years. So how come a group of people would accept their holy book without the authenticity of it?
This is a complicated. I mean, biblical scholars or historians are people, individuals, and some have faith in God. Some are Christian, some are Catholic, some are liberal, some are agnostic. Most of them are Christians. But this is a problem when you study this subject at university, which I did, the biblical studies, Christian history, church history. You have to navigate all this stuff, and it's very, very challenging spiritually. And many people, some people lose their faith. I think most of the people in my year became much more liberal. I don't think anyone actually lost their faith. They had to challenge a lot of the views they had and leave them behind before they started the degree, because it wasn't sustainable. Most of them managed to find a kind of a faith that they lived with. But the bigger issue for me here is the chasm, the gulf between what the scholars know, the Christian scholars know about the Bible, and what so-called average people know, the average Christians down here. They have no idea. This guy, bless him, had no idea about this stuff. And yet it is widely known in the scholarly community. It's not a secret. No one's keeping it secret. But for some reason it's not being taught or communicated or shared effectively. That's the question. Why is it not happening? And people like Bart Ehrman, who you mentioned, have been very successful, I think, in writing popular books that are understood by a big audience in America and Britain. So he is doing a good job, but most scholars...
He's an atheist or so,
No.
right?
When he started his career, he wasn't an atheist, he was a Christian. Okay. He was an evangelical Christian. He'll tell you his story, how he went to Moody Bible College and how he, under Bruce Metzger, this great scholar, he was a Christian and all that. It was only much later that he became a liberal Christian for some years, and then he became an atheist. He says nothing to do with the Bible, it's to do with other issues.
My other question is, as well as Christianity in the recent, Christianity as we know it today is